Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. We continue our coverage on the upcoming Alaska summit with US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. We have a recent update for you. US President Donald Trump says he had a wonderful talk with Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko and looks forward to meeting him in the future. He confirmed they discussed the release of 1,300 additional prisoners, as well as Russian President Vladimir Putin's upcoming visit to Alaska. Meanwhile, the Kremlin says Putin's plane is expected to arrive at 11 a.m. local time, where he will be greeted by President Trump at the plane ahead of their highly anticipated summit. The Russian president is also seen laying flowers at a memorial commemorating US-Soviet World War II cooperation in Russia's Magadan. We're now joined by three guests to discuss this upcoming, much anticipated summit in Alaska. We're joined by Dmitry Simes Jr. He's the head of Sputnik India and he joins us live from Moscow. We're also joined by Scott Faulkner, the head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm, and he joins us live from Washington. And we're also finally joined by Rajiv Malhotra. He's an author and he joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much for joining us, all three of you. Dmitry Simes, I want to start with you here. A huge day for geopolitics. This war with Ukraine has been going on for over 3 years now. What can we expect from these talks once they occur, once Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin meet each other? Can you analyze the relationship and also, of course, the occasion?
Well, it's difficult to know fully, what will be discussed. We had only a sort of cryptic allusion from Putin's senior foreign policy aide, Yuri Ushakov, last week when he said that the Americans made an acceptable proposal to Russia. And that's why he said this meeting is taking place. So far, we haven't had any leaks on what that acceptable proposal might be. But it's quite clear that if we're talking about the occasion, right? What we see from the American side is that there is a recognition that Ukraine no longer has a feasible path to victory at an acceptable cost for the United States. And so if I had to describe Russia's mood going into these talks, the one word I would use is confident. We're confident because the dynamics on the battlefield are in our favor. We're confident because our economy has been able to withstand unprecedented Western sanctions over the span of 3 years. And we're confident because we see that we are genuinely moving into an era of a multipolar world where it's no longer the United States as the global hegemon, but there's also countries like China, like India, and that these countries want to continue dealing with Russia regardless of what the United States or the European Union want. So we're coming into this meeting with an open mind, but I think that we're coming in also from a position of strength.
Yes, thank you very much. Rajiv also joins us. Rajiv, this meeting has already been pitched as a win for the Russian President Vladimir Putin by just the fact that it is happening. Of course, as Dmitry says, Russia has faced unprecedented Western sanctions since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Is this a win for Putin, and is this Russia's new beginning on the world stage?
Well, I think there are two important considerations. One is the role of India, and the other is the role of Ukraine itself. I think India has played a remarkable role in supporting Russia at big cost to itself, did not buckle, which is what the US wanted. And it's been very defiant about its friendship with Russia. And therefore, it has strengthened Putin's hands, because you can imagine what if before this summit, India had buckled, then Trump would be very confident that, hey, we can circle you, We can circle you, deny you your oil revenues, which are very important for Russia, and it would at least put a morale booster for Trump and the opposite for Putin. So India has played a role in strengthening Putin, at least in terms of giving him moral support and also concrete, tangible support. And I think Putin probably recognizes that and appreciates that, and he's planned a visit to India later this year. The second country that is also a factor, so it's not just these two countries, Trump and Putin kind of meeting. Another country that is important is Zelensky himself. Now, he has said that he does not want to concede a single inch of their territory, which means that Trump has a very difficult job bridging the gap between what Putin demands, which is he wants to take that eastern part of Ukraine that they have captured, and Zelensky says, to hell with it, I will not give you a single inch. And the European Union supports him. So I think this is not an easy win-win for Trump, because either he has to accept Putin and at the expense of upsetting the EU and Ukraine, or he has to be very tough on Putin, double down on him, threaten more sanctions and whatever else. If it's the latter, he may end up making it worse for India, because that's the sad part. India is sort of a pawn in this chessboard, in this fight between Trump and Putin. India is being used as a weapon, punishing India as a way to put some pressure on Russia. So that's how I look at this situation. There are two chess players, but there are at least two other countries not participating who are going to be affected.
Yes, thank you very much, Rajiv. Scott Faulkner also joins us for the discussion. Scott, Donald Trump had spoke to reporters on Air Force One as he was departing for Alaska. The issue of territorial swaps was brought up. He did say that these discussions will be had with the Russian president, but some Ukrainian concerns have been addressed. He says the final decision does lie with Ukraine in this matter. Do you think that Donald Trump will stand by Kiev's interest and also address the concerns of Volodymyr Zelensky going into this meeting with Putin?
He better, because a lot of the Donbass area has the very minerals that are involved with the agreement that was signed back in April between the Ukraine and the United States. So right now, with Russia continuing its aggression in the Donbass region, a lot of the mountain areas have the very minerals that are covered by the April agreement. So until Russia is pushed out of those areas, the April agreement, starts to become null and void, and that's an important array of strategic minerals the United States needs.
Yeah, Scott. Dimitri, I want to come back to you for the next question, and the same question goes to you. Territory is obviously in huge contention here when it comes to this conflict. Russia currently controls it around 20% of Ukrainian territory. Donald Trump's statements have been varied. Obviously, we previously saw a hostile approach when he met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in that infamous White House meeting. However, now language towards the Russian president has been much more firm, with him pitching territorial, quote, swaps, and has also now recently released a statement that final territorial concessions, possible concessions, will lie with Ukraine. Your thoughts, the Russian stance on this statement?
Well, when it comes to Ukraine's position on territorial swaps, beggars can be choosers. The battlefield dynamics right now are extremely against Ukraine. Your previous guest mentioned the situation in the Donbass. And over the past week, in just the past week, we've seen Ukrainian defenses around one of its last remaining strongholds in the Donbass, Pokrovsk, seriously fraying. We've had situations where basically Russian soldiers have been able to take empty trenches because the Ukrainians no longer have enough soldiers to man them. And we also see a situation where Ukrainian air defenses are totally overwhelmed by Russian drones, Russian missiles, and so on and so forth. And so this sort of idea that the Ukrainians can, issue ultimatums on territory, it's just totally disconnected from reality. Russia's position is that all of the 4 territories which voted to join Russia back in September 2022, that is Donetsk, Lugansk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and of course Crimea, which voted to join Russia in 2014, that Ukraine must fully withdraw its remaining forces from these territories. Otherwise, Russian forces will push them out. And if what's happening in Pokrovsk is any indication, that could come much sooner rather than later. So it's in Zelensky's best interest to try and accept Russia's terms now, instead of sacrificing tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands more troops, trying to defend occupied territories that he's still going to lose anyway.
Okay, Dmitry there speaking from Moscow. Do stay with us. We have some visuals coming in from Magadan of the Russian president laying flowers at a World War II memorial, significant as both the Russians and the Americans worked together for that victory. This obviously signals a warming towards a possible future and a closeness between the Americans and the Russians, which has recently been so stale. We now move back to Ranjiv for another update. Ranjiv, do you see this relationship improving? We've obviously talked about the language that Donald Trump has used. Donald Trump has been criticized for his previous dealings with Vladimir Putin. Some say that he has approached appeasal. Vladimir Putin there signaling his want for a closer relationship with the United States. There's also talks of a possible nuclear deal, arms deal, which could possibly happen at this summit. What are your thoughts, Rajiv?
So I accept the previous speaker's premise that Russia is winning the war, and Russia is holding the cards as far as the confidence is concerned and the military victory is concerned. And Putin is not likely to give up his demand for the eastern Ukraine territories that he's already taken over, especially since the public there supports a union with Russia. So, but this is unacceptable to Zelensky. So now Trump has to come up with, and he's a master deal maker, and he comes up with wild ideas, and he may come up with some wild idea. What if he proposes that in exchange for giving up this territory, Ukraine will join NATO, and therefore Ukraine will be secure. Whatever 80% it's left with will be secure. So it gives up the 20%. Russia is happy, but Russia cannot invade another inch because Ukraine will become part of NATO, or at least that option will be there for the future. Now, till now, Russia has not accepted the idea of Ukraine joining NATO. But the argument Trump could give is that if you got the territory you want, then how does it matter to you who is or isn't in NATO? It's really none of your business. And that could be a possible way to keep both of them, to give both of them something, because you cannot totally deny Putin's absolute demand that he wants that territory, and nor can you shove it down Zelensky's throat without giving him something. And if you gave him in return that he joins NATO, he's secure, Europe is happy, NATO is happy because they got another member. I mean, that is a possible solution. It's just a wild idea, but it could happen.
Rajiv there, illustrating how complicated this conflict really is. Scott, I wanted to come to you next. Scott Faulkner, Zelensky has said that we are counting on America. Donald Trump, we know he's susceptible to flattery. Vladimir Putin, as we've seen, is very, very good at that. Do you see Donald Trump being a truly impartial mediator in this conflict, with both countries' interests at the forefront?
Well, I don't think this meeting should have occurred at all. I think that, a lot of us who know our history remember September 1938 in Munich, where Neville Chamberlain and Hitler sat down about the Sudetenland, which is very similar to the Donbass in terms of a majority-minority ethnicity. And then, of course, in March of '39, Hitler took the rest of Czechoslovakia. So I think that we're looking at some very disturbing historic parallels where if we recognize aggression by Russia over the Donbass and then somehow let them consolidate, they're going to go after Ukraine at some point. So like the previous commentator said, unless we really provide some major security arrangements, such as NATO membership for the remaining part of Ukraine, we really are just setting ourselves up for further aggression. I mean, the key here is that Putin has violated every single agreement he has signed since becoming president of Russia. He cannot be trusted. Everything out of his mouth cannot be trusted. So to cede him anything without some major concessions on the other fronts is folly.
Dmitry, I wanted to bring you in next. This parallel has been brought in by critics of how Donald Trump has addressed and dealt with the Russian president. The Munich Agreement of September 1938, appeasement. This obviously backfired for the Allies. Especially, also we can bring in the example of Sergei Lavrov coming in today to the talks with a CCCP T-shirt on. What are your thoughts on the criticism and how people are comparing these two historical parallels?
I think it's a totally preposterous, idiotic analogy. And the reason I say that is that the current Ukrainian regime is one that openly glorifies neo-Nazi war criminals like Stepan Bandera, Roman Shushkevich, people who actively partook in mass killings of Jewish civilians, of Polish civilians, and who worked very closely with the German Wehrmacht during World War II. And in fact, these Ukrainian nationalist units were so infamous for their cruelty that even the Germans thought that, the Ukrainians went too far. And when we look at the modern Ukraine, this is a regime that has openly neo-Nazi units in its army, such as the infamous Azov Battalion, the Dnieper Battalion, and others. You frequently see Ukrainian soldiers with Nazi insignia. When Ukrainian soldiers abandon their positions, you frequently find copies of Mein Kampf, books about the Third Reich in general. So this sort of idea, if we are going to be drawing parallels to any country to Nazi Germany, the most logical candidate would be Ukraine. Because Ukraine is an ethno-supremacist regime, which basically says that, quote-unquote, pure Ukrainians are superior, while cultural ethnic Russians are a subhuman underclass, which is meant to serve these pure Ukrainians. So, again, the people who say this clearly don't know the basic history they're trying to cite.
Dmitry there speaking from Moscow. Rajiv, I wanted to bring you back in here. Now let's look once again at possible outcomes of this summit. Some people think this is a grand show for both leaders, and there could be something else at play here. However, when it does come to this war, what secessions do you think that both sides would be willing to make? Ukraine has said that it won't give up any territorial land. Donald Trump has pushed the phrase land swaps coming into this meeting. However, what if you could reiterate to our viewers, what do both sides, in an ideal world, want out of this meeting in Alaska coming up later today?
Well, the only win-win I can think of would be where Russia gets to keep the territory and Ukraine leaves it, has to give it up. But at the same time, Ukraine is given something in return, which is NATO membership. And Russia would not be able to object to that. It would be part of this deal that they accepted. One thing you should remember, Russia has not taken an inch or threatened to take an inch of NATO. They have not crossed the line of attacking NATO. So this business that if you give them 20%, they'll come after the other 80% is fine as long as Ukraine is vulnerable. But what if Ukraine is no longer vulnerable and becomes a member of NATO, then it's just as secure as Poland or any of those other countries. So I think that's a way to stabilize, to create the ethnic unity of Russians in Russia and in Donbass, and satisfy Putin that he's fulfilled his life mission of reunifying all that, and at the same time give security to Ukraine's future. You're better off having 80%, which is secured in the future, than to have 100%, which is not secure, which is all volatile, and the entire 100% is being bombed and could be destroyed. And nobody's going to keep supporting you indefinitely with the level of weapons and so on that the West has been doing. So West is getting tired, depleted, impatient. They're not going to continue doing this. Ukraine has no choice. It'll either have to surrender in a very drastic way and a very embarrassing way, or it'll have to concede the 20% and accept NATO membership and be extremely happy. They should go for this deal. If they can get this deal, they're better off than going on fighting for their entire 100% land, which is not practical for them to achieve.
Yes, I want to talk about the delegations on both sides next. We have obviously a Russian and a United States delegation led by the presidents of both countries. Let's go into the Russian delegation first. We have Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, we have Defense Minister Andrei Belousov, Finance Minister Anton Siluanov, and Presidential Aide Yuri Ushakov. And we also have Kirill Dmitriev. Leading the US delegation is, of course, President Donald Trump, with Secretary of State Marco Rubio next in command, and also CIA Director John Ratcliffe, and he's also joined by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan Kane. Reports also significantly mention Vice President J.D. Vance and additionally US Special Envoy to the Middle East Steve Witkoff. Of course, not attending Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. I want to get your thoughts, Scott, on the US delegation, what they might bring to the table, negotiating tactics. We've also got some financial ministers and individuals, powerhouses from the United States coming as well. What are your thoughts in the team that Donald Trump has sent to Alaska?
Well, certainly the A-team. I mean, when you look at the Biden team, which was probably one of the weakest and most incompetent foreign policy and national security teams in American history, we now bring one of the strongest teams in American history to the table. And so they're hopefully, no matter how much Putin might try to play to Trump's ego, you have other people at that table who probably are much more realistic about who Putin truly is and what his real agenda is. And hopefully they will be the ones that get listened to. And again, part of it is if Putin starts to push back, basically daring the United States to up the ante in terms of sanctions, there, hopefully, especially with Hegseth there's a lot of things we can do to them besides secondary tariffs on places like India. I mean, we could interdict their 75, shadow fleet. I mean, the Russians have 35% of their oil income comes from this shadow fleet of 75 oil tankers that sends fuel to China, to India, and other places, if we begin interdicting them, we destroy the Russian economy. So I think that we have some significant sticks to wave to try to make sure that Putin is a bit more sober in his aggression fantasies.
Dmitry, the same question to you. Obviously, President Putin was criticized for his delegation that he sent to Istanbul for direct talks with Ukraine. This certainly doesn't seem to be the case here. Among them is Kirill Dmitriev, who is sometimes referred to Putin's, quote, Trump whisperer. Your thoughts on the Russian delegation going to Alaska today?
So surprised that a meeting between the leaders of two nuclear powers would feature a more prominent delegation than a meeting with the Ukrainian regime, right? Because at the end of the day, Ukraine is not a self-sufficient country that can make its own decisions. And so it's totally logical that that Russia would send a more high-profile delegation to a meeting with Trump and his team than, to people who really don't decide anything. I think that Russia is bringing a very comprehensive delegation. Again, I think the inclusion of Defense Minister Belousov is very important, and Finance Minister Silvanov is very important, because occasionally from the American side, we see assessments of Russian battlefield situation or Russian economic situation that simply doesn't comprehend with reality. So these two figures can play an important role of giving a reality check and maybe pushing back on some of the misconceptions that exist on the American side. But on the other hand, as you pointed out, Kirill Dmitriev is someone who has adopted a very sort of optimistic, big picture tone. He's someone who says that if we're able to get beyond the question of Ukraine, there's theoretically a lot that the United States and Russia could do in terms of win-win economic cooperation. And so, I think that one of the points that you're going to definitely see the Russian delegation stressing is that if we're able to move beyond Ukraine, if you agree to stop waging this sort of proxy war against Russia that was started by Biden, then we can have a genuine reset to this relationship. We can start afresh and try and build something that will be stable, not necessarily allied relationship, because great powers are rarely allies, but something that is much more stable and much more constructive than what we have right now.
Thank you very much, Dmitry. Rajiv, I want to come to you next. Some people have criticized the one-on-one leader approach. Some people say that this is authoritarian in its style. What are your thoughts on the possible dangers, the possible benefits of these two extremely important men in geopolitics meeting together? And we've been told that they will have a one-on-one meeting, making such huge decisions in a summit like this one.
So I think while I agree with the other speakers here, other panelists, that both delegations are very strong, but the two leaders are particularly strong. They have strong egos. They are known to be very opinionated. At the end of the day, the two delegations are there and very powerful, but certainly these two individuals are going to call the shots. I think that the two individuals have to look at their prestige, their strategy, what they want. The stakes are a little different, because in Putin's case, he is a principal party in this dispute. Trump is not a principal party. He's a middleman. He's a negotiator. He's a deal maker. Zelensky is the principal party. So what you have is one principal party negotiating with an intermediary without the presence of the other principal party, and that's a bit of a strange thing. But Trump has a very big ego. He does not want to leave empty-handed. He's promised the resolution of this dispute for quite some time. Even before he got elected, he's been saying, I'll do it in one day. And it's very embarrassing that he hasn't been able to do a darn thing And if anything, Putin has become harder and tougher. So he does not want to leave, that, hey, I failed. So if Putin cannot be, and Putin knows this, and if Putin cannot be swayed to shift his position, then the only way Trump can declare victory is to come down hard on Zelensky. He can say, I have made this deal, and you have to give up the 20%. And I have also convinced him that in exchange you will get NATO membership, and Putin has agreed. And now I'm going to shove it down your throat, and you have to accept it. So it could be that he ends up like that. That's one possible outcome for a small ego to declare, for a strong ego to declare victory. And the other possibility is that even this deal doesn't happen. No deal happens, in which case Trump will be exceedingly upset. And then the question will be, what more will he do? And he could do all kind of wild things to Russia, to Russia's allies like India. And I think we haven't discussed the India-US situation as a result of this. But my take is that today's India's Independence Day, and I really liked Prime Minister Modi's speech. India is going to get closer to Russia as a result of this. India's cooperation, defense cooperation, is probably going to strengthen manyfold. It's already very strong. India is internalizing, domesticating, indigenizing all the defense production very successfully, but Russian experience, maturity can accelerate that, and Russia wants to do that. So India has slowed down further defense deals with Russia because of the United States pressure to buy F-35s and so on. But given the way India feels ill-treated, and there is strong public pressure for good reason, it's likely that the further development of India-US defense will be paused, and the defense of India-Russia defense will probably accelerate. So that's on the side for somebody who's not participating in the negotiations is keenly observing all this, because it's going to affect them in this way. And the people in Delhi are watching to find out, well, what will happen and how does it affect us, because it really affects India in a very serious way.
Yes, Rajiv, thank you very much. We have some breaking and some visuals for our viewers, where Russian President Vladimir Putin has made a stopover in Magadan while en route to Alaska for his summit with President Donald Trump. The Kremlin has said the stop was pre-planned before the high-stakes meeting, which is expected to focus on US-Russia relations and a range of geopolitical issues. We are currently showing you those visuals coming in from the Russian region of Magadan, which Vladimir Putin has stopped over on his way to his summit with Donald Trump. Dmitry, I wanted to finally come back to you on this. Next question. Donald Trump has continued to speak about the art of the deal. That is his whole shtick. At the end of the day, when you make a deal, sometimes concessions have to be made. What compromises do you think Vladimir Putin and Russia as a whole could possibly make to end this war?
I mean, I think we've made the compromises that Russia is willing to make quite clear. Russia is willing for Ukraine to pursue greater economic integration with the United States, with the European Union, and to basically do what it wants in terms of its socioeconomic future, in terms of its overall sense of identity. Russia's request is quite simple. Ukraine should not be turned into a weapon against Russia. Ukraine shouldn't be basically a launching pad for NATO missiles, for NATO tanks, for NATO drones, other weapon systems against Russia. And Russia cannot accept having a regime in Kiev whose sole ideology is centered around hating Russia and Russians and seeking to erase everything Russian. And so, I mean, I think that there's a lot of things Russia could do with a reasonable Ukraine. Russia has spent since 2014 trying to establish some sort of reasonable coexistence with Ukraine, has tried various sort of peace efforts, turned a blind eye to Ukraine's numerous ceasefire violations and broken promises. But the Ukrainian regime all this time has been hell-bent on confrontation. If the Ukrainian regime changes this fixation, then I think that Russia and Ukraine can have normal neighborly relations. But that means accepting new territorial realities that, were made as a result of Zelensky's mistakes. And it means accepting the fact that Ukraine must never become NATO's dagger and Russia's underbelly.
Yes, finally to wrap up this, I wanted to come to Scott. Scott, your hopes, what you think that President Donald Trump might bring to these talks, how the American people are reacting to his stance. Is it one of worry? Is it one of hope? How do they think that Donald Trump will conduct himself in regards to when he comes face to face with Vladimir Putin for the first time?
I think it's divided. I think there are some people who are very hopeful that the art of the deal will prevail and that Trump will come up with, as he says, an initial framework which will then lead to a three-way or a two-way summit between Ukraine and Russia. There's a lot of other people like myself who are very skeptical of Putin's motivations. Trump always talks about stopping the killing. Well, we should stop the aggression. And one other thing that's not been brought up is that 20,000 children have been captured and taken out of Ukraine and moved into Russia. This is that very much going back to the Soviet era of Russification, where you try to turn the culture into helping the central regime in Moscow. And so an accounting of those children takes place. So we'll see what happens. I mean, a lot of people are concerned that Putin will play Trump, especially on the ego side. He'll dangle shiny objects like a weapons deal, and that this could divert attention from the real issue, which is Russian aggression that started this war, and Russian aggression that is going to basically take any ceasefire to consolidate and to try to move even further into Ukraine if they can get away with it.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank my guests for joining us for this discussion, Dimitri Simes Jr., Scott Faulkner, and also Ranjiv Malhotra. Thank you for joining us, gentlemen. And we will, of course, here on NewsX World continue to bring you all the updates about this hugely anticipated meeting with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump. That is all that we have time for this hour, but we will continue to bring you more updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.